Hey there, I hope you're having a great day. D&D is a tactical combat game. There's no getting around it. It's 90% of the rules. Sure, we can roleplay all we want. We can have all the different types of travel, adventure, politics that we can come up with. But at the end of the day, the game is designed for combat and more so to be tactical. So players need tools to think more tactically. We can't assume that a player knows that, hey, it's more effective and more tactically sound to prevent damage than it is to heal and recover from damage. It's not something that the average person will think when going into combat. They'll think, I have sword that has monster. I must kill monster with my sword. And we need to give dungeon masters tools so they can enable their players to think more tactically in combat. A lot of what I'm going to talk about right now is going to improve your game from to hey. It's meant to give players more information, not less, while also not necessarily making you do more work as a dungeon master. Let's dive in. Giving players more information to be more tactical in combat reduces player anxiety. The frustration of what to do next, I don't know what to do. It's because they don't have enough information on what to do, and therefore they get stuck and eat up more time on their turn. So this is something we want to reduce. We want to reduce player anxiety, player frustration, DM frustration with players not knowing what to do. It requires more information and choices to allow players to gain advantages in combat. One of the players of Dimension 20, Murph, also the host of Not Another D&D podcast. He pulls a lot of inspiration from video games to make his combat fun for his players, adding different terrain, whether it's through the VTT, on-table terrain, or theater of the mind. He adds obstacles and cover to make movement interesting, makes movement an important choice. Adding time limits, it puts a priority list in their mind, and Murph does this super well. One of the easiest ways you can implement a timer. How many rounds will it take until the monster calls for aid, for minions to show up and outnumber the players? Now let's look at Indestructible. He's making an RPG, Vagabonds. He streams pretty regularly. In one of the live streams, he had a guest talking about some of the homebrew rules that this guest runs for their own home game. One way to make the game more tactical is actually to double the monster's hit points, but make sure they have a vulnerability that the players can learn either before or during combat. And that vulnerability helps keep the monster on par for the CR. Another unique and interesting way to make a game of D&D more tactical is actually stealing from video games. Something that the modern player is used to knowing and understanding, the health bar. One of the downfalls of video games and tabletop games compared to, let's say, high budget movies is we don't actually get to see the damage that occurs on a monster. We can hear on dice rolls like you've done 4 points of damage, 12 points of damage. In a video game, we can see the animation happen. Now, video games can spend more money on multiple models, creating phases of damage for their bosses and monsters, or they can simply and cheaply add a health bar. And I recommend this for dungeon masters. It is so good. Look at some of the most popular RPG games out there. Elden Ring, Darkest Dungeon, Final Fantasy, even Baldur's Gate 3, which is based off Dungeons and Dragons. Let's not think about this as from the dungeon master's perspective. Let's start with the player's perspective. A player seeing a health bar gives them a lot of information. It gives them the most amount of agency a player could ever have in combat. The Dungeon Master will not be adjusting the hit points and making it easy to win or lose depending on whenever they want. No, this is a tactical combat. If I make my choices just right, I can kill that creature, go to that creature, kill that creature, and do that. I can choose not to fight this because this is a waste of my time. They have too much health. I can go help that caster deal with that monster to free them up, and we can both double down on this creature. It creates tactical thinking because you're giving them an awareness, a visual awareness of progress and damage. And a health bar is not that hard to make. For example, I've made these spin dials for my players where they can see the day of the month or they can see the time of day. And it allows me to visually communicate very simple information to my players without having to stop and think about, what time is it? No, I'm tracking it, and I have a tracker in front of me. Now, from the Dungeon Master's perspective, what happens if you prepared the combat to be too tough or too easy and didn't feel right? If you feel like it's an L, take it. Learn from your L's and apply your logic and newfound information to the next combat. Because I guarantee you, when the players defeat a monster that they can see the health bar, it doesn't matter if it was too easy. They thought they won because they thought cleverly. They didn't think they won because you didn't prepare the combat well. You're taking a lot of the anxiety and blame off yourself and putting it objectively on the monster, separating you, your prep, and how you run to the monster itself. If you put a monster in front of them, they deal max damage, and you move the needle just a little bit, they will know, okay, well, we should move on from here. Dungeon Masters who don't change or fudge hit points during combat and still feel a little queasy about this, why? You don't change or fudge the hit points. Might as well share it. 4th edition of D&D, there was a feature called Bloodied. When the monster hits halfway of their max HP, they are considered bloodied. This was good for 2 reasons. One, it did what the previous advice does. It communicates HP to players, and then they can use that information to their advantage. The second great thing about it, on the DM side, it auto-recharged special abilities, so Dragon gets their breath back. You can give them free movement that happens instantly, as if they're adjusting their tactics due to their HP. Or you can have minions show up and change the course of battle. Of course, you can have all these things happen because it's a boss and it's cool, and it affects the tactics of the game. In the same vein as sharing monster HP with players, I have always wanted to start sharing the AC with players. I'm not a fan, though I understand the logic, I'm not a fan of hitting and missing until we know where the AC is and we're constantly taking notes down. There's a form of tactical thinking in that, but we're fighting just to find out invisible information. But at the same time, I don't want to just say his armor class is this out of the gate. This doesn't feel fun to me, and it feels too metagamey. But at the same time, we know that if they have a type of armor, if they seem to be very dexterous, we know their AC is going to be higher. So something I recommend, on the first attack against the monster, whether it misses or hits, especially if it misses, the players learn what the AC of the monster is. Now, everyone knows, okay, it's 15 on that monster. Oh, the AC for that monster is 9. That's why it's so easy to hit. Oh, that monster's AC is 20. That's why it was so hard to hit. Now that we know that its AC is super high so quickly, everyone can adjust their tactics so that way they can think through this. Okay, if the AC is that high, normal attacks really technically at disadvantage. So we want to be flanking, we want to be getting cover, go to the high ground, we want to be helping our allies to get advantage on their attacks to more likely beat that AC. Or we want to get the caster into a spot for them to cast spells that have saving throws, since saving throws avoid high ACs. It's kind of tying into everything we talked about is telegraphing. You know, we're telegraphing the hit points, we're telegraphing the AC, we're telegraphing interesting objects and cover and places and terrain for combat, but also something from video games, telegraphing an oncoming attack. In video games, we can see the animation build up to hit. In movies, we can see the punch and then punch back, and we understand that the dodge is there because we telegraph the action. Something that's really good in World of Warcraft is boss monsters have visual animation that appear next to them, telegraphing the danger zone of their attack. In games like Elden Ring, which are based around blocking and dodging, that doesn't work in tabletop games, and especially in 5e, blocking with a shield doesn't really work, or dodging, which is just an action to get disadvantage on attacks. Unless you use a homebrew where shields don't add to your AC unless you use the reaction to block it, or dodging only works as a reaction, not an action. But how do we communicate oncoming attacks in tabletop gaming? Is it always the dungeon master having to animate? Maybe. Or telegraphing what the monster's next moves are at the end of the monster's turn, such as I'm going to attack the wizard, telegraphing that that's what's probably going to happen, or telegraph that the monster looks like it's going to run up to the top of the cliff and jump back down to do a slam attack right in the middle. We're giving that video game telegraphing like danger zone information. Players can do what they wish. This adds stakes, urgency to every round of combat. If at the end of the monster's turn, it's being telegraphed what it might do next, if it has HP that players can see, if people know what its AC is, they are focused on what's going to happen next. And if they don't know what's going to happen next, there's no urgency. There's just swing the sword. Just beat the meat out of it. Really want to apply all of this to my future games, making sure that flanking, hiding, and high ground are a part of every combat. Interesting objects and things are laid out in the combat. At the end of my monster's turn, I telegraph what it might be doing next, what the players perceive it to be doing next, sharing the monster's AC immediately after the first attack on it, and even sharing the health bar for my monster. Do I need to make a health bar for every single monster? No. I can just say, when you hit it, you realize that it has a total of X hit points, and that player's going to track that minion or that lesser creature's hit points. But if it's a solo boss monster, maybe just a solo owl bear in the woods, give it a health bar. See how your players react to that. And if it doesn't pan out and it feels too gamey and everyone agrees, don't do it again. Take the L, learn from your mistake, and try again, and have fun playing Dungeons & Dragons with your friends. I'm Cmike, and I'll see you next time.